Somebody recently asked me to speak about ADHD paralysis, ADD paralysis, meaning somebody has ADHD and they just can't get out of their own heads and they want to just learn some techniques that they can start to use. So whether you're on medicine, non-medicine, different philosophies, you got to do what you got to do. You got to figure it out. You got to speak to your people. But regardless of what happens, a bunch of my clients have lots of ADD, ADHD, and what we have to try to figure out is what are we supposed to do about it? How can we just set ourselves up in a practical way to allow ourselves to continue to be successful? Because at the end of the day, just because you have ADD or ADHD doesn't mean you can't be successful. And what we have to realize is that it's not necessarily something bad. It's just something you got, and we just got to figure out how to use it. And I think everybody has their own tools, their own things that they're going through that they have to then try to figure out with how they can start to utilize them. And certain ways people use it and certain ways people frame it, I think shift the whole perspective in terms of what is really going on here. So today we're going to talk about ADD, ADHD, and what is we can start to do with somebody who has it to allow themselves to start to see the success that they want. And yes, it might be a hurdle for them, but on the other hand, it might be actually your superpower. And that's where we're going to start. So when it comes to really any type of thing and anything that we go through, anything that we have, any, physical, whether it's mental, whether it's, I don't know, spiritual, whatever it is that you're going through, if you have something that isn't, and I'm going to say something because I don't think it's negative or positive. And what we have to do is we have to try to frame it in a positive way. Like this is how we're born. This is what we got. This is the cards that we were dealt. What we need to try to do is we need to try to figure out how is it we can start to reframe it. And I think back in the day, I know with a lot of my friends in like high school and whatnot, it was framed as like a bad thing. They like made jokes about it, but it was framed as a bad thing. Like people looked down on it and whatnot. And I was working with one client and it literally changed my perspective because he kept beating himself up because he had ADHD. And he was so annoyed and so frustrated about himself that he wasn't able to do certain things because he had ADHD. He couldn't focus as much as he would like to. And what was interesting is that he told me this story that happened with him that we were supposed to have a meeting, and then I texted him, I WhatsApped him, and I was like, dude, like, are you coming on the call today? He's like, no, sorry, I can't make it. I'm like, all right, no problem. Like, what's going on? He's like, I'm in Europe. I'm like, Europe? Like, what? He's like, yeah, I'm in Europe. I'm like, when did you decide to go to Europe? He's like, this afternoon. I was like, what? And then when he came back from his trip, he was like, he told me like he had the most amazing time, this and that. And his friends went to Europe and they were going and they like invited him last minute. And he was just like, okay, great, let's go. And he went with them. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, dude, you are so lucky that you could do that. Like for certain people, they don't have that luxury of just picking up and going and doing something. Like they have to be so planned out and so organized. They'll be so worried about like what's going to happen that they won't be able to take any action to do something like you just did. Then he told me another story about how he he was away on a weekend with a bunch of different people, and at the end of the weekend they were gonna like I don't know they were gonna go somewhere, and he also decided like last minute like let's just go do X, Y, and Z. And he said some of his friends weren't able to like come and do it just because like it wasn't part of the plan. It wasn't they weren't organized enough. And I told him, I'm like, dude, sometimes you beat yourself up about like having ADHD. But you should know that it's also a real superpower for you because just like sometimes you get distracted and you don't stay focused and this and that, like your friends who don't have ADHD can't do what you do by just experiencing things in different ways. And I said, if we could start to just shift that just a little bit and reframe our ADHD as not something negative, but something positive, then all of a sudden we have this ability to really step into the thing that we want to step into. We don't have to start beating ourselves up because we could just look at the positive in it. We could look at all the opportunities that we had. We had all the times where, I had like these spontaneous, like exciting times in my life. I was able to do something. I was able to, I was able to not just get stuck in something my whole life because like I was just so focused on it, but I was able to like break out of it. And I was able to see a bigger picture and I was say, hey, what's going on here? I'm really not interested in this. Like, what can I do? And I started to just reframe it with him, and he was starting to see it because he started to pick up patterns of different things that he was able to do. Yes, he had his things he had to try to figure out, but on the other hand, he had so many gifts to be able to do that. And I think if you could just start to reframe it, so whatever it is, whether it's ADHD or whether it's something else, understand that the things that you have are going to be a gift compared to somebody else's stuff. And I think it's extremely important to make that shift, because once we make that shift, then whatever we're going through, whatever happens in our life isn't a bad thing. It's not something it's holding us back. It's actually helping us move forward. And all it really is just a shift in our mindset. It's just a different perspective. It's a different perspective of what the world might have told you, your parents might have told you, your teachers might have told you, your friends might have told you growing up. And once we do that, that your life is different. You're freed. And I think for so many people, they get so stuck in terms of what it is that they can do. And then they don't take the action. Because they don't take the action, they end up beating themselves up even more. And they start reinforcing this idea that they have, this belief that they have. And then they start labeling them a certain way, themselves a certain way, because that's who they are. And I think if we all had the ability to say, hey, X, Y, and Z, I want to be able to do this, and I don't want to think about it like this, then imagine what our lives can turn into. Imagine what our lives can be like. And I think for so many people, they're so stuck in terms of what it is that they're doing and the way that they're thinking about themselves. And they're in this pattern and this loop. And what we have to try to do is break that. And once we can start to prove to ourselves, because he was doing these spontaneous trips throughout his life. But once somebody was able to point it out to him, that's when he was able to be like, oh, you're right. Like, my friends can't do that. And there were other opportunities, other things that were happening in his life. And because of that, he was able to start to take advantage of it. And I think for so many people, we don't realize what is that we have and the blessings we have. And we only just focus on the negative part. It's negative and it's positive, but what are you going to focus on? The glass is half full and it's half empty. It's both negative and positive, but what side are you going to be focusing on? And I think that's something that's really, really important. So practically though, let's say somebody does have ADHD and they're starting to shift their mindset and they're trying to reframe, their perspective on really looking at it as a superpower and trying to utilize the power within to be able to tap into it. So what are they supposed to do practically? Because at the end of the day, it's like really hard to focus. So number one is I would get really curious in terms of how it is that you really work, because I don't think there's like a one shoe fits all for everybody. And what we have to start to do is we have to start to pick up the patterns. And if we can start to pick up the patterns, then we can start to see which patterns work and which patterns don't work. Because for some people, having sticky notes all over their computer could be the greatest thing. For another person, putting reminders in their phone could be the greatest thing. For other people, time blocking could be another thing. We'll talk about all these different things, but there's so many different techniques that you can start to use, but all of them can work, but also all of them can not work. And what you have to do is you have to try to figure out what works for you. And once we start to understand that, then we have this ability to start to move into this step into what it is we want to do to be as productive as possible. And what's interesting is that I think most people who are successful, like, we're not talking about the uber successful people. We're talking about the people who are like making it, who are like up and coming. Like, yeah, they're working a lot, but there's also like, if you could be hyper focused on something specific, that could be the thing that could help you take it to the next level. And there's such a creativity that comes with somebody with ADHD that they see things a different way. And that's what's amazing. And that's the superpower. It's not so rigid what's going on. It's not like, oh, we're just going to flow downstream because everybody's flowing downstream. It's how can I then start to flow upstream? And that's something that so many people don't realize when it comes to what is that they're looking to do. So when it comes to time management, number one is batching your time. If you could batch your time, and I would say be curious with how you're batching your time. So is it batching your time in 10-minute increments? Is it 20-minute increments, 30-minute increments? And you have to figure that out for yourself. But maybe depending on the task, you're going to pick one over the other. But once you start to understand and once you start to realize that, then we start to recognize, hey, you know what, there's a way that works for me. For certain people, it's, there's certain activities I want to make sure that I'm doing at certain times. So I'm going to put reminders in my phone, or I'm going to put, sticky notes all over the outside of my computer, or in the, using the sticky note app, right, and putting them in your computer. But recognizing that, hey, what can I do that? What's going to allow me to take those actions? Then it's also realizing, okay, what are the actions that only I need to be doing versus things that other people could be doing? Because there's one of my clients that I was talking to, and he's running this event, and he put out a lot of his own money. He needed to get just reimbursed for it. And I think it was like months he didn't get reimbursed. And it was so frustrating for him because he's like, why can't I just sit down for 20 minutes and just look up, going through my email, pick out all the receipts, and then just send it to whoever I need to send it to. And what was interesting is that he just couldn't do it. So it was like, okay, so who else on your team? Like, maybe we hire a secretary who can then do that for you. And recognizing what are the things that you need to be doing versus what are the things that other people need to be doing. It's like, he loved going out to meals and meeting with clients. And it's like, okay, dude, so let's do more of that. And we could hire other people to be doing the stuff that may be more difficult for you. And I think that is something that is so important when it comes to the work that we're looking to do, is like trying to figure out, okay, what is necessary for me to do and what is not. And it's harder when you're just getting started, but still, like, what are the steps that you need to be taking? Because everybody's going to start out somewhere. And what is it we can start to do to slowly build it? And I think success, like we want to be successful, but you just really need to be focused for a certain amount. It does not, I don't think it's going to be so focused for such a long time. And I think we have this idea of like an 8-hour day, 9-hour day. I was like 12-hour days, whatever it is. Like, yes, that will be more helpful. Same time, you could be focused for 3 hours during your day. Like, you could get so much more done than most people do. And I think that's something that so many people don't realize. And if we could start to do that, that could be something that could be really, really helpful with the work that we're trying to do. So when it comes to that, we have to understand that we have to manage our time better. We also have to prioritize our tasks. So some things don't really matter. Some things don't matter every single day. So maybe there's like a list of things that you have to do that it's like you schedule 30 minutes once a week, and that's your time block that you have. And once you do that, then all of a sudden, then you have that ability to move forward and do that. And then once you do that, then all of a sudden it's not so overwhelming. It's not so scary when it comes to really getting the stuff down. Because all of a sudden, I can just prioritize my tasks. I can just do the things that I want to be doing when I need to be doing them. And that is something that can be extremely powerful with the work that we're trying to get done. Another thing we could do is we can really just break the tasks into smaller steps. So instead of doing something for 45 minutes, we're going to break it into 25 minutes, to 22, whatever, 23 minutes. You get it, what I'm trying to say. And if we could just break it down into smaller tasks, these are 10 things I need to be doing over the next, I'm going to break it down over the next week. I need to be doing these 10 things. So each day I'm going to do 2 of them, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And once I do that, if I could do these 10 things, then all of a sudden I'm so much more productive. And I think this is like one of those things that anybody's trying to be more productive with their time is they know exactly what they need to be doing. And then they break down those specific steps. And that is something that could be really helpful for us. Because once we do that, then we can start to develop the routines that we need. We know that, okay, these are the 10 things I need to get done in my business, and these are the times I need to be doing them. And then all of a sudden you have that ability to take advantage of. And then you can start to make progress. And then you can start to move forward with what it is that you're looking to do. And I think for so many people, they don't realize it. And the reason why they don't realize it, because they beat themselves up so much because they keep missing deadlines or they keep messing up. But we have to realize we need to get feedback, and you're just getting a quicker feedback loop. And that is what we need to realize. It's just quicker feedback. Okay, this didn't work. What can I do better next time? How can I do it? How can I reframe what success really looks like? Because guess what? You're not going to sit for 2 hours and just focus on something. And what we have to realize is that, or maybe you're too focused on that, you're not focusing on anything else, right? So what we have to realize and what we have to understand is that if we could reframe success, it's saying, hey, as long as I sit down for 20 minutes and get something done, like that's the win. Like that's the win. And it's it's resetting the standards. Because once we reset the standards, then we're not going to be upset because, hey, I did my thing for 20 minutes. Okay, I still have more to do in the task, but guess what? I still have, my goal is just to hit it for 20 minutes. And that is something that we can start to do. And I think also surrounding yourself by people, getting people who can help you. I know there's specific coaches who work with, like I mentioned, I worked with a couple of people with ADHD, and it's really getting yourself surrounded by people who can help support you, who can be on top of you to remind you, like, hey, these are things we're doing. Are we doing them? Are we doing them? And just getting it done and making sure that we're slowly just breaking it down. And I really think that if we could start doing these different ideas, then it could really help us with just moving the needle. And we don't have to move the needle all the way down the line today. Just slowly build it up, slowly work out on it. And that could be something that could be extremely helpful for us. So recognizing that our ADHD is a superpower. It is what we are going to be using to help us succeed. We're not supposed to be like everybody else. No 2 people are the same. So it's not you thinking that like, oh, I'm different because I have ADHD. Like, no 2 people are the same. And guess what? We all have our own superpowers. We have to try to utilize and realize, okay, what is going on here? And that could be something that could really help us to move forward and really take advantage of different areas of our life. And once we recognize that, once we see that, then we can reframe everything that's going on, because remember, it's just feedback that we're getting back. We're getting a quicker loop of our feedback. We're not going to be beating ourselves up. We're going to be learning from it and moving forward. And once we start to break down our time management, once we can start to recognize, okay, what's going on here, prioritize our different tasks, break them into smaller steps, we start to develop the routines. We're not going to be beating ourselves up as much. And we're going to have the support that we need to make sure that we're being consistent with it, because at the end of the day, it's the consistency. And that's the hard part, right? It's the hard part. How can I stay focused on this for so long? But if we break it down, how can I stay focused on this for 10 minutes, once a day or twice a day? And do it when the time is like you might have your most focus. And recognizing that, okay, when is that time? How is it that I can do it? How can I make sure that I'm not distracted by anything else? How can I make sure that no other screens or my computer or my phone are not around me? And if we could just start to recognize these things, and all of a sudden we have the ability to start to really zone in on what is that we need to be doing. And that could be something that could be tremendous when it comes to us being successful. So let me know what questions you have. To be happy to help, and we'll see y'all on the next one. Peace.